Okay, guys, welcome to today's session. Um, Today we're looking at the um, first chapter from the textbook that we're looking at in terms of the leadership and ethics. Now, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a funny thing here. I wanna keep your names on the side here so I can see if anybody has a question or comment that they want to bring up. So just want to make sure, is this large enough? Can you guys see this clearly? The PowerPoint there in the middle.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, so let's get started. So what we're looking at here is basically the beginning of the process that we're looking at, and we're going to start with looking at the course description. So the course is an introductory course. It's not meant to be a heavy in-depth course in leadership, ethics, and governance. It focuses, the way in which it's designed, it focuses on your personal relationship and your personal experience with the concepts that we're going to be looking at, especially where it's going to be looking at your own personality assessment and evaluation, as well as an evaluation of your own personal ethical value systems. And assignments that are given will reflect this type of these learning outcomes that we're looking at here. We're going to be looking at the application of the tools of leadership as well as ethical decision making. You'll see that take place. So we're going to be looking at the various theories of leadership that have evolved over time or developed over time frames. We're going to apply and defend decisions using various tools of ethical decision making. We spoke about that before. Create a plan that applies to the concepts of good governance. That's your leadership and plan coming down to the end there. We're going to work in teams, and that way you're going to be able to demonstrate that you have the capacity to work well in teams together, displaying an awareness of how group dynamics works and how teamwork works. Now, you guys tend to do well in this area because you all are kind of accustomed to working in group activities, both from classroom activities as well as from working with each other in your jobs. So because kind of like dependent on each other all the way through. We're going to be looking at the issues that face our communities in relation to leadership and the issues that we're going to try and look at. And the last thing here, which is probably the most I think what I want to use here, is probably the highest level of outcome that we're looking at here, is that we would like to see some behavior modifications indicative of a personal philosophy of positive leadership and ethics to be seen among you guys as participants in the training. So most of you all understand what behavior modification is. You all did this in OB, right? Organizational behavior. You all understand? Anybody can just briefly explain to me what is behavior modification? Come on, you can do it. You have to call on somebody, way? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so well, we now started that OB class, right? But I would want to say is that when I say behavior modification, is like changing your personal behavior to adapt to something more positive for society and the world at large.
Mm-hmm. How have you now, seeing as you all are now doing it? Let me correct myself, therefore, and not make that assumption. Have you engaged in behavior modification with other people around you? Now, some of you here, I believe, are parents, yes?
Yes, a lot of that.
Right. And how do you go about changing the behavior of your children when they do things that you don't quite agree with? Now, don't let Karen be the only person answering this, huh? Or worse yet,
you punish them, you deprive them of certain things, you restrain their movements, these kind of things.
all right, so you deny them privileges and that kind of stuff, right? So that is what we call external motivations. So that they do something or you do something and somebody provides an external form of stimulus to make you change your behavior, correct? Now, what happens in the absence of that stimulus? Nine out of 10 times, what happens with the absence of when that stimulus is not around?
Well, so sometimes people tend to continue on that path, and it can either be a worse off scenario, or they might check themselves and they might pull back on their own. Only
Right,
God knows.
but generally, when there is, it's sort of like speeding. They people drive fast, except when they see police around. That's behavior modification, right? So behavior modification was that what we were hoping to do was that more people will just simply obey the speed limit laws, correct? Without having to have police involved in that activity, correct? So behavior modification comes from two places. As I said, the first place that it tends to come from is external motivations. In our course objective, what we're hoping to do is to have you want to change, and that's an internal motivator, or what we call intrinsic valuation. So that basically what we're saying is that you, as an individual, choose to make the behavior change because you see this as a positive um, outcome for yourself or positive influence in your life. So the course that we're looking at here, therefore, has this very lofty objective of getting you to agree to want to change some of your behaviors in relation to leadership and ethical behavior. Not because the course is telling you to do so, but because you have interacted with the material and you have found that the information that's being provided gives you internal motivation to want to achieve this. That makes sense? We understand that issue there?
Yes, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So generally what happens is it's a bit challenging because we have to really work hard to get you to want to agree with these particular ideas, right? So let's continue. Well, we spoke already about the two textbooks that we're going to be utilizing to try and achieve or try to cover the material for this class. And this is where we're now going to be starting in terms of chapter 1. And chapter 1 is looking at leadership in the modern world, an introduction. And what is trying to do is trying to posit leadership in the context of our current time frame. Now, the text is a bit dated, but at the same time, the concerns and the way in which they're going to be dealing with this information is relevant to our current situations in the 2020s, all right? And primarily, one of the things that we are going to have to put some effort into is exploring the leadership issues that face us in the Caribbean and local context, because the nature of the textbooks that we're utilizing is in fact US in its origin, so that we have to put our own local context on the concepts that we're going to be looking at here. So this is why I would say that when you're looking to develop examples to explain things, try and utilize where possible. It may not be possible all the time. Try and utilize examples that would connect with our local experiences here in Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so the model that we're going to be looking at defines leadership as a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. So this is a bit of a difference here, because the definition focuses our attention on the fact that leadership is about a relationship. It is about the relationship that you have with other people. That focus is important because that is what puts us in a slightly different perspective about our focal point of what is a leader and what is a leader's responsibility. So we're going to be looking at, when we start to look at the model is actually referred to as the relational leadership model. because the focus is always going to be about the relationship that you have. Now, if you look back at your own private experiences with other leaders or people that you've worked with, the nature of your relationship with that individual generally has a negative or positive correlation with the level of experience and successfulness that you have with that. So let's look at this from a student perspective. Those students who have, or those teachers that have good relationships with you as a student, those classes or subjects you would probably have a good time with, and you would have probably been more successful with that course than a lecturer that you worked with with whom you had a very strained relationship with. Similarly, in your working environment, when you work with a superior with whom you have a decent and good relationship, a healthy, good ethical relationship, there's the possibility that you'll work well together, as opposed to somebody with whom you have a really bad relationship, and you don't get along that well. Would you all agree with those types of analogies that I'm making there in terms of your own personal experiences?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I would tend to agree with you, sir. I would tend
Right.
to agree with you.
And that therefore focuses our attention on the nature of the relationship being a critical element or critical part of what a leader does. And this is your responsibility. Your responsibility as a leader is to develop a good relationship with the people with whom you're working, because you can't get anything done if you have an antagonistic relationship with the individual. So we'll take that. So the focal point of this is that leadership is about relationships that we develop. All right. So when we look at leadership, we look at leadership through various frameworks. And one framework that always comes to mind when we start to talk about leadership is politics. So in the political science, basically what we're talking about when we talk about leadership, we're looking at how people arrive in positions of leadership, the level of power that they are able to accumulate, and how they use that power to influence other people or other situations to be able to get what they think they want in the situations that they present with. So here we have, for example, 3 individuals who arguably are probably 3 of the most powerful leaders in the world today. And each one of these leaders well, for example, Biden is supposed to be the most powerful, is touted as being the most powerful president in the world. All right, because he's the leader of the most powerful country in the world. But of late, China is threatening the US domination, and Russia, of course, is in part of that whole thing because of their current situation in the Ukraine and so on, creating a lot of difficulties with the United States and with other countries as well. But primarily, the United States seems to be this adversarial nature. So what you find happening with these 3 individuals is that they become representatives of a power base that they're using their power to influence others to achieve particular goals. So the Russia and the Chinese president and the Russian president, they are going to be utilizing their power and influence over other countries or with other countries to try and get their agendas sorted out. Similarly, the United States will be doing the same in trying to get that done. Now, when we look at a broader ambit, this just happened the other day. This is the G20 summit, and what is the G20 summit about, and why does it meet? Anybody pays attention to this stuff at all? Anybody? No? These people just get together to meet and for no reason whatsoever. Well, the idea of the G20 summit is these leaders of the largest economies and most influential economies in the world get together to set up agreements and memorandums of understanding over very important issues that are seen to be of global importance. Things like climate change and climate control, weapons and nuclear arms development. They also have things like they try to deal with public health issues, especially with coming out of the COVID pandemic, issues that came up. So all of those types of things come up as elements or areas of concerns where these leaders get together and have discussions and have subcommittee meetings with other technocrats who get together and agree in principle on what they would like to see the world moving towards in the future. Another similar, can you think of any other large conglomeration of countries meeting that is similar to this, that has a similar kind of agenda? Anybody?
So, well, I recall the G7 summit. This G20
Well, this
summit.
is an expansion from the G7. It's gone to G20 now. Yes, Lyndon. That was you talking. Oh no, that was Jason.
Taran,
So I thought it had moved to G8 now. Isn't that G8?
Yeah, there's a G8 and there was a G10 as well. You see, the sizes of these countries and the level of importance, you have certain countries coming up that are becoming more important as their economies grow and develop. Lyndon, I see like you want you want to, wow. Let me just deal with this thing here. Lyndon, what is it you want to say? I see your hand up.
No, so sorry, my hand remained up as I was making the point of the G8 summit. Sorry, I need to take it down.
That's okay. All right. Right. Anybody remembers the UN when they have the UN meetings? United Nations. It's a similar organization that gets together to deal with things like poverty and again the rights of children and the rights of women and those kind of things. Very broad issues in which they try to get all countries to sign up as agreeing to some basic principles of human rights and that kind of stuff. And the idea is to hold each other accountable in the world population to world scrutiny, to make sure that they stay on top of these targets and whatnot. That sounds familiar. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, sir. I've been here for a while, but thanks anyway.
No, I just saw your name, so I just wanted to make sure. If you've come in and I wasn't aware that you were here before, just let me know, please, so I can update the attendance register. All right.
So well, you know that I am here now.
I'm here.
So Lyndon, sir.
All right, yes, Lyndon is here. Right, so I call your name and I forget that you wasn't here on the previous thing. All right, cool. So the UN, the G20, yeah, the G7 before. Generally, it was the largest economies in the world, but they started to expand it because a lot of other countries are starting to grow economically and have more influence in the world around them. Another organization that tends to meet regularly as well is the WTO, the World Trade Organization. They get together, but specifically to hammer out issues that arise coming out of trade, because trade is one of the major elements. So a lot of economics, but it's all based upon political power. And the more influence that the countries have, the greater say they may have in how the policies move forward. That makes sense? Yes, Dwayne. And well, I think
So hence the reason why China kind of trying to overpower America.
say
Due to
that China.
that is part of the point that we was making with China earlier towards USA.
Yes, China. Well, it's not only China. It's the BRICS.
BRICS on the whole, yeah.
Yeah, BRICS on the whole. They are. I don't think that the idea is that from a economic standpoint, they are challenging the status quo, and of course, nobody likes. First, anytime you start challenging the status quo, those people who have vested interest in the status quo staying the way it is will always want to defend what exists, and therefore you're going to have resistance. And Russia, India, Brazil, South America, and it's not South America, South Africa and India are part of that BRICS organization, and they are pushing for some changes to take place that possibly threatens the dominance of the United States in the economic forum. I mean, we are inundated with the United States and its dominance because we're its neighbors. So I mean, there's a vested interest in it and things staying the way they do. All right, I'm seeing as if there are comments in the thing here. I won't be able to see that. Oh, CARICOM, yes, that's a good one too. That's a good thing. CARICOM is another place or organization that meets on a regular basis, like these summits. But their focus is on the Caribbean and what's happening in the Caribbean situation. So the leaders of the CARICOM nations get together to make decisions about a very wide plethora of concepts and ideas stemming from education, children's rights, economic streamlining, currency issues, trade issues, environmental issues. The problem with CARICOM is that individually, the countries within the CARICOM region may have power over each other, but the only way they can have a much greater say in the world economies is as a bloc, sort of like the EU. But if we think about it from the perspective of simply the number of people living in the Caribbean region and what we demand in terms of goods and services, economically we have a very small voice. So therefore, when there are problems, there's a tendency for larger countries like these here to simply just ignore us because we're small fry, basically. So there's that whole issue of power and influence. All right, so another framework we could look at leadership through is through the concept of management. Now, you all are doing management of protective services. Now, management focuses on the effectiveness of you as a leader getting the job done, meaning we are looking at the outcomes that you are able to get based upon the relationships between you as a supervisor and the subordinate staff coming that you work with. The situation is such that we focus in management upon the outcomes. And therefore, that's why when we look at these pictures here, these are a bunch of individuals who were listed as top business leaders in 2021. How do we measure the successfulness of these individuals? We measure their successfulness by the amount of profit that they earn. And that's the issue. It doesn't speak to the nature of the relationship that they have with people, nor the whether or not the goods that they provided or the services that provided is beneficial for the world around us. It doesn't matter, because in those cases, business or management focuses its attention on the outcomes, and therefore there's a bit of a problem when we look at things from there. I think I'm seeing another chat on the WHO. Okay, guys, I can't see the chat, so I would prefer that you just, jump out and say these things and contribute, because I can't see the chat icons coming up when you put things in the chat. I know, or at least I don't see the chat. So it might be a little easier for us to be dealing with it when just, mention those things. Like NATO is a good thing. I saw one there, the ES what? ECOAS. What is that? Looks kind of weird.
ECOWAS, sir.
What is that? What
It's a group from the Eastern African countries, a group
Alright.
of economic members. I can't remember exactly what the acronym means, but it's Eastern African states that get together for
I
cooperation.
know that they're trying to do a United Africans something because of the amount of resources that Africa has. And of course, well, NATO is the focus of NATO though is military. Well, and its most powerful members is the US. So that's something. But I know the African the African Union was something that people were looking at. But again, there's a vested interest in ensuring that Africa does not unite and come up with a more united front, because it's far easier to control and extract from these countries the resources that you'd like to get if they remain divided and unprotected by each other. So that's something that I know African leaders are pushing towards. Similarly, it's one of the reasons why we have CARICOM. CARICOM is also pushing for that same type of thing, because if we amalgamate as one mass of individuals, we have a stronger say in what's taking place in our own environment. And that's something that we have to pay attention to. All right, another view or framework through which we look at leadership is through anthropology. Generally with anthropology, it's more historical in nature, where we look back on past civilizations to observe what was leadership like there. And the way, in a lot of instances, we're talking about observing societies that did not have written history. And in particular, the way in which they observe the societies is by examining their culture, their influences, the languages that they develop, and the tools that they utilize to be able to develop themselves. So that from those particular elements, they're able to indicate or say something about the nature of leadership within that particular society. So agrarian societies, for example, would have you'd have found leadership in that environment would be somebody who either owned or controlled very large quantities of land, or was able to create better systems of agricultural development and increase the output and yield of crops and so on. Whereas if it was a more warfaring type of community or warfaring type of culture or civilization, then the leadership will generally be those individuals who are the strongest and most powerful and fiercest fighters in the society. Now, let's put ourselves from an anthropological point of view, looking at ourselves now in our time frame. If 1,000 years from now, somebody was to look back on the world today, what would be the cultural influences, language, tools, and other factors that they can pull up to evaluate our society as leadership? How do people arrive in positions of leadership in our society now? What are the main tools that we utilize? So you might find, for example, that the main tool that they identify as a critical tool that everybody was using is a phone, a cellular smartphone. And our language might be one that is made up of a whole set of emojis and acronyms or these LOLs and those abbreviations that suddenly, because we don't have enough time to type all of the the words out in the way in which we communicate with each other. So what would that tell us in relation to how our leadership evolves during this period of time? And a lot of leaders, if we look at all of the leadership comes up in relation to the amount of attention we get. So you put something up into some sort of social platform and network, and it's the amount of observations that you get, the amount of likes you get, the amount of thumbs up, or the amount of, and that determines that you are now an influencer. So we have this thing now, that not this thing, but for a while now we have these YouTube influencers or Instagram influencers, or generally a social media influencer. So whatever they do influences how a whole pile of people in your society or in this society behaves. If they decide to do one thing, everybody follows them, that type of stuff. So you have that whole thing in terms, I think it's you have followers and all that nonsense. What does that talk about in terms of if we were to look at leadership in our time frame as opposed to a previous time frame, and what hopefully will happen in the future?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think if they look back 1,000 years from now, this is my view, they might see a lot of schemish behavior in achieving leadership position.
Well,
and carrying out what they would have promised, because across the world, there's one common cry. If you listen to a lot of people in societies, a lot of people say that they don't get what was promised to them. It was not delivered.
True, that's true. That's true. I would agree with that. All right, Lyndon, I see your hand is up. Lyndon? Stilling? Okay, I'm not hearing you. Rhonda? Or Rona, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that both leadership and society, or the social influence and media, they both intertwine. They have a great influence, because if we look at the past, you have like Hitler. Hitler had a great following. He was very charismatic, you know, and his beliefs and everything, he influenced a large majority of people to do things.
Yeah,
And
but
it's the same now.
the difference, however, is his reach was only within a smaller geographical land space.
Yeah, I think if we
Whereas
had
now,
social media then,
yeah.
if we had
Well,
social media then, when he was
right.
alive, it would have been greater.
Yeah. Well, now you see that's the point. Now you have a wider audience, which means, I mean, if you think about it, how many of you here have like a YouTube channel or something along those lines? Or if you follow anybody who's a YouTuber or Facebook, that kind of person. And do you look at somebody who has 6 million people following them, 8 million people following them, 20 million people following them? This is especially, and that's why they don't use, or they don't leave their social presence, their social media presence left up to chance, because now it's become so critical to manage the impression that they have across the board. All right, Lyndon, your hand is still up, but I'm not hearing you. Still not hearing you. All right, so you might have to leave and come back to reestablish your audio connection. Because I suspect you want to make a statement, but we can't hear you. All right, so moving along. But yes, it's important if we were to look.
So are you hearing me now?
Right, we're hearing you now. Go ahead, Linda.
Sorry about that. So concerning the point you made, as per using an anthropological lens, So you said like cell phones are something that we would have used in this culture. So that's like a
Well, I think it's
artifact.
more. It becomes like an artifact. Yeah.
Yeah, I comment to something. So we would see that in this culture, and this is just something I am thinking about. We would see that leadership has changed from the formal or classical model that we would have, because we have now branded persons who are not per se leaders in real life. Nowadays, just my perspective. Someone may want to say it's not, they don't agree. And not leaders in real life situations, but they are influencers. Are they to be if we look back at our civilization, or if persons look back, they would say that there was some form of leadership that really was not classical leadership in the sense of, or for the point Ronald made with Hitler, as persons were led by Hitler, as persons followed in that classical rule. We have people who are basically on a chair in front of a computer and are considered leaders, but not in real life situations. I'm not saying that things that they are doing or saying can't apply to real life situations, but I think the classical role of leadership, influencing people, yes, I know leadership is about influence, but carrying people in a particular direction.
Right.
I think that that has been redefined largely by what we have seen in our culture. And that's why I think is the difference from, if a person looks back, what they know about leadership, we'd see that, for instance, a political leader, but now we have something called an influencer, who is a person over a network giving information, and they are influencing and leading people. That's just the difference I think that we'll be seeing if we look back at civilization.
That's true. That's a very good distinction that you're making there. And it's important for us to remember that a lot of it, the individuals, and you see the thing about it, from our perspective, we may not be seeing all aspects of it. But if you look at the younger generation and look at how they're making some of their decisions, you have to remember that these influencers are having real-time impacts on the behavior of a whole group of individuals on an international platform. So it's people from all over the world who are being influenced by these individuals to do certain things, and that's why they have so much influence over these things, and therefore they can be considered leaders of a sort. But at the same time, and then the thing about it is that anything they do influences sort of like what other people's choices would be and that type of stuff. Yes, Lyndon, go ahead.
So, but as per the discussion, should they be, I know there are schools of thought on this, should they be considered leaders? Because the concept where you look at
they are.
So right, so if you look at the concept of morality as per good leadership, bad leadership, so they are leaders, but
when we start to delve into tricky things like some of some of the big questions that we have to deal with now in terms of, let's say, gender identity, let's think about the Me Too, remember that Me Too movement that started in the United States and then kind of spread around the world in terms of violence towards women and that type of stuff. Those kind of movements start off with an individual who makes a position or makes a statement or comes out and says something, and then everybody else jumps on it. Like, this is sort of like bandwagonism kind of situation, if you really think about it from that perspective. But that then starts to put pressure on people in what we would call regular positions of leadership, to have to now come out and make a statement about what is their policy in relation to this issue being bandied about by these influencers. So a lot of times what you end up happening is that these influencers start to have a massive amount of influence on political decisions or economic decisions being made by individuals in power, in positions of power. And that is how that goes about working. That is generally how politics is supposed to work. Politicians are supposed to, and this is what somebody was talking about earlier today. I think it was about one of the issues that we can look at with leadership is that a lot of times the leadership doesn't deliver on what they promise. So people come to power and they promise certain things, and who or what holds them up to scrutiny for that purpose. So they said they would do X, Y, Z, but they never do it. How did that happen, and why is it that we as a set of individuals sat back and let that person remain in power regardless, or remain in positions of influence regardless of the fact that they lied on the thing? And this is one of the functions of influencers. Influencers like in the United States, you have these lobbyists that work in the political system. The only difference is that everybody could lobby, and it could be lobbying for bad things as well as lobbying for good things. The focus of this program is to look at us working together for positive change. Now, there's a distinction to be made there, because now we have to start to measure from an ethical standpoint what is positive and what is negative. And that brings us into the realm of a different aspect of evaluation that we're going to have to look at. All right. Now, as you all spoke about this before, another framework that we look at leadership through is through history. And what we look at is how people how key figures that arose in massive or significant timeframes in our past history, how they go about behaving, and what were they, what were they involved with in, and how do they go about doing things? Now, let's look at these four individuals here, because somebody already brought up Hitler. So these four individuals were the key or pivotal individuals involved in World War II. The three individuals there became allies to defeat Adolf Hitler. And upon the defeat of Germany, the two on the left turned against the one on the extreme right, my right, your right, I believe. And that led to the development of the Soviet Union and the dichotomy that took place, that led to the Cold War after World War II, and then the division into Russia and so on, because of their system of governance was different for the democratic system that existed in the United States and the UK at that point in time. So the behavior or actions of one individual in this time frame was significant only in that fact, in terms of what he did and what we ended up. But the correlated behaviors of the other individuals involved in this then led to other decisions that were taken that led to years of negative or positive impacts that go forward, that happened after the fact. And sometimes the way in which we view things is tainted by, because I know a lot of people who can't stand the concept of communism or socialism, and were very annoyed. And a lot of that had to do with how the West or Western culture treated with socialism and branded it as being absolutely evil. To this day, you still have that whole issue of socialism as negative and socialism is wrong and yada yada yada. But all economic systems that exist in the world are made up of some levels of government providing services for the people, which is a socialist movement, and some of it being provided by the private sector. But that's it from an economic perspective. But from a historical perspective, these four individuals and their behaviors and what they did and how they led their people in their individual cases led to long-term decisions or long-term impacts that even to this day we still deal with it, because if all you need to do to replace hair is you stick in now Germany has faded, because after the defeat the German country itself was actually put into kind of a retrograde movement altogether, though they have stabilized and become a very strong economy. The UK actually was in decline during that period. The British Empire was declining, and the US economy was rising. And its importance was growing, especially as the US dollar was the dollar that was utilized to facilitate trade. So today, if you put the current US president and the current Russian president in position there, you actually realize we haven't really changed much from a historical perspective. All right. What about this gentleman here? Anybody recognizes him and can tell me what is the social movement that he's dealing with or he's associated with? Anybody recognize him?
Yeah, like Dr. Martin Luther King.
Right?
Doctor.
Right?
Yeah.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His dad was also a doctor.
Corrected.
Right? And what was the social movement he was involved in? Well, obviously it's in the United States, but it wasn't the civil rights movement. Right. Okay.
Yes,
Anybody knows this gentleman? This is a very early picture of him when he was in Berkeley University.
There's a Trinidadian.
Yes, it is.
This man Toure.
Yes, Kwame Ture. But back then his name was Stokely Carmichael. That was his name back then. That's when he first got. Yeah. Right. And he was important in Trinidad. How? Why? He brought back into Trinidad or helped to develop the Black Power movement in Trinidad and Tobago. And that actually led to the Black Power riots and that type of stuff. The uprisings in the 1970s here in Trinidad. He was part and parcel of that. All right. If you want to know a little more about Kwame Ture, you could look at a film called The Black Klansman, in which he's featured. His part in that whole process was featured in that film. Check it out because I thought it was a fairly interesting depiction of him during that period, because it was just as the time when he was changing his name. These are other influential people in history. If we think about these individuals, and if you look at these pictures, you should recognize some of them, maybe not all, but each one of these individuals have had some degree of influence on the world around us today. From anybody here into music should know these sets of individuals here, Elvis Presley and the Beatles, and the influence that they had on the nature of music in our modern society. This gentleman here and this lady here, Walt Disney and Marilyn Monroe, the influence that they've had on how film developed and how the animation developed over that period of time in terms of what they did.
So Bob
Yep.
Bob missing from the picture.
Bob is missing from this, yes. And the reason why Bob is not here is because though reggae is a very popular art form, it wasn't one that permeated the entire world. If you're and became like, top of the charts for so long and that kind of stuff. Its influence is still growing, and its roots can be felt in a lot of popular music today. But a lot of it is not easily recognizable. Yes, Waldron.
Yeah, but sir, in some instances, I'm not in agreement with that statement, simply because the FBI came out some years, well, not so long ago, and they indicated that they killed him because of his influence.
Yes, his influence in Jamaica.
Was Jamaica only? I thought it was America and England as well,
No,
especially.
it was Jamaica. You see, I remember what was important in Jamaica at the time was what he was doing politically. That's what got him in trouble here. What got him in trouble was he was influencing political action in a country that didn't suit the Americans. And the more importantly, American industrialists. They wanted access to the bauxite and to the resources of these countries without political interference. So basically, they would put these, or they would assist in getting these people elected into positions where they would have these sweetheart deals to allow their firms in to extract. Yes, Lyndon. It was not okay. Bruni, you're saying
that was a little all right. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, hearing you.
So as Paul Bruni said that the FBI should have killed him. So that's a little I should have a big stick policy was still in operation there.
Yep.
In Jamaica.
I mean, I can't say definitively that was the case. Or although the FBI did come out and say that he was a person of interest. But there are a whole host of individuals in Latin American society as well as in the Caribbean as well, that were assassinated or they were removed from power one way or the other through one form or the other because they stood in the way of their idea of what they thought was right as opposed to what was wrong. Yes, Bruni. Ms. Waldron?
So sorry, my hand, I didn't put it back down.
Okay. See Sterling's hands up again.
So I just want to take this back to what you said earlier with leadership establishing relationships. And you would have referenced the G20 and then we spoke about G7, G8. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say then, but I think I was having some connectivity issues still, is that this is where I find that this thing is almost hypocritical because we have these official meetings, we have these agreements between states, partner states, countries, regional countries, and that kind of stuff. But we still have animosity. We still have animosity between these nations that sit at a table in a general council and come up with particular decisions.
Yep.
So one of the things is that in I don't know about the film Oppenheimer. I haven't seen it yet, but I looked at a documentary with it. The US now wants to have control of, I don't know if they're the only state, but considering the nuclear expansion of countries and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But when they thought that they were the forerunner with the nuclear development, they didn't want to have any agreement as Oppenheimer would recommend. Let's come together and put together something that this will never happen again.
Right.
You know, so I find these things are hypocritical. When the ball is out of their court now, they want these things, and I'm saying that yes,
that's quite correct.
Yeah, so I find these things are hypocritical, and just
I agree with you totally because at the end of the day, a lot of times, some of this well, you see again, the reason for this, Lyndon, is that history is written by the victors, not by the people who are subjugated. So the alternative views of why certain things were done comes up after the fact when there's some degree of cooling off that goes on and the truth comes up. All right, so Vanessa and Taran. So Vanessa, let's deal with you. Vanessa? Duncan? Not hearing you, Vanessa. All right, what about Taran? Let's try that.
Yes, sir. So in my limited reading, I see one common thread where persons of a certain, I don't want to use the word color, but a certain ethnicity would have changed the dynamics of the entire globe. And again, to me, it trickled back down to gaining access to resources.
It is, yes.
Having control over those resources.
Yep.
Maintaining control, rather, because a lot of the wars, when I look back at the nature of the wars and the genesis, it had a lot of conspiracy theorists and a lot of information comes after that you really can't verify because the manner it comes through Hollywood, it comes through, well, now we are seeing social media postings about a lot of these things, and we see that some of these things has its roots in people, you know, undermining the legitimate
Well, there's
leaders.
the story that you get from the Main Street, basically. But there's a backstory as to why things are actually taking place.
Right.
And that creates a dichotomy between the what it's all right. Do you remember after 9/11? Speaking of which, that was just the other day, and they ended up going into to Iraq and getting rid of Saddam Hussein.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Right, and all that nonsense about weapons of mass destruction and all that nonsense, and nothing was ever found. But it was because there was an excuse as to why they were going in there. And the primary excuse that was going in there is to control oil and control access to oil. Those kind of things. Joel Hansen, and then I'll get back to Bruni.
I say, hear me?
Yeah, just a bit soft. If it could probably move a little closer to your microphone, it might help.
Yeah, this better?
Yes, much better.
Well, actually, you answered my question. Well, my statement I was going to make. Because in everything I've seen the Americans, whether it's UN, the G8 summit, the Americans are part of it. They are the big spenders. They are the big funders of everything, and they are the ones who usually put the story how they want it to be told. And anybody that goes out, because they made a mention of Bob Marley. Now, my father is Jamaican, and he always used to tell me they brought Bob Marley back from England, where he took time away from Jamaica and the whole scene to come as a go-between the two political parties that were going at each other.
Yep.
And in that whole coming there, he was more like a peace leader. You know,
Right.
so an American now took the opportunity that he didn't want to do what they want to do and took him out. But it just seems that, you know, America, once you don't go along with what they want,
they'll find a way to get rid of
go
you.
against you. And you see that here. We go along with America for our neighbors, Venezuela. But they also fund us in a lot of things, our radio networks, our military aspects of things. You know, they help us that way.
We
You know,
recently
so
hosted the US music.
ambassador,
One
we got some, and we got
of
some
their
boats
music
there.
bands was down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
But once you go against them, they kind of, you know, put you in the blacklist.
If you
They
ever
won't
want
give
to
you
read
anything.
something a little more substantial about what I'm talking about, or what we're referring to, this is like the beginning of this whole thing. This is before, and I think there's the author's actually online with this as well on YouTube. Look for a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and read that, or look at that. He also does a podcast as well. But in the 70s, he wrote that book, Confessions of an Economic. It's an eye-opening book to read, in relation to what the World Bank and the IMF were up to in relation to how they went about doing certain things. All right, Bruni, and then we have to move on.
Yeah. So as we come close to what it is I was going to ask, are we to be afraid of the fact that China, Russia, Kim Jong-un, and all these persons are talking and looking at in some ways the aspect of not making the US dollar the predominant dollar or the go-to dollar for trade?
Well, eventually, what is going to happen?
World War III?
Right. I don't know about World War, but what we may be asked to do as a country is to make a choice as to which currency will be used, or we will use, and at some point in time, because the United States is going to want to accumulate as many supporters for themselves, and of course the BRICS countries are probably going to want to get as much supporters as well. And at the end of the day, it's going to be who has the most amount of influence across the board. And yes, you might have some, well, not yes, but you'll definitely have some muscle flexing and saber rattling and that kind of stuff going on. Whether or not they can afford to go to war, I think as a world, we can afford massive conflict like of the nature of like what World War I and World War II was like. Because World War I and World War II was fought with conventional weapons. The end of World War II saw the emergence of the that nuclear arms race, which, if you remember what Oppenheimer said, you know, I am become death, because of the level of destruction that he saw, that the bomb was capable of producing. We cannot afford that kind of thing. I mean, and then we are such a fly speck in the overall scheme of things that our point of view will not matter, because we don't represent enough economic influence. Even as CARICOM, we don't have enough influence to prevent these giants from you know from fighting each other. I mean, we can have our own point of view. We can make statements to the point of we don't agree with this and we don't agree with that and that kind of stuff, but nobody really cares what we have to say, because at the end of the day, what we say has no bearings on what they do. Right, Bruno? Bruni, sorry. Okay, so let's move. I see a hand still up, so I guess it's up because you forgot to put it down. All right, cool.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right. So the other view, and this is quite interesting from a historic point of view. The other perspective through which we look at leadership is through the perspective of psychology and sociology, because psych will look at how individuals, the behavior of individuals, and sociology looks at the behavior of society. So the combination of the two is what's gonna help us to understand people and people operating in groups. And these three individuals have a lot to contribute to the concepts that we're going to be looking at, especially the gentleman on the right-hand side here with the glasses on. His name is B.F. Skinner. He was a sociologist who wrote and created a lot of wrote a lot about, I should say, adult education and education theory. And a lot of the work that he and his field does contributes to a great deal of the thinking that we go about in our current leadership models. The other two gentlemen, Freud and Karl Marx, they also, because Karl Marx is actually a sociologist and the other one's a psychologist, just remember that. They all contributed in their work towards the development of some of the ideas and concepts that we're going to be looking at in things. So a lot of these different theories that we're going to be looking at in this this course has their origins in these areas of thinking, especially the area of psychology. Now, in your current fields, the approach to leadership is probably going to be, now the vast majority of you all operate in environments in which leadership comes out of seniority. Is that correct? It's about the amount of years served, and the idea with the service means that you should have developed some greater level of expertise. Is that correct, guys? In terms of answering this question.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Does qualification come in?
So so if I may say something,
Yes, go ahead.
And I'm speaking on the backdrop of in the arena in which I work, right?
Right.
We have
identify
leadership.
that.
We have leadership investigation. we have leadership and we have management, right?
Right.
There would be particular instances where a manager of a unit may not be the leader of a particular investigation.
Correct.
So on that.
But they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Management and leadership can work together. We will actually see that in this course as well. Right. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, how do people arrive in positions of leadership within your organizations? From what I remember,
merit. I don't want to say the word and bite me tongue. Meritorious aspect, as well as the experience.
Right.
You know, I guess
so it's meritocracy as well as
meritocracy,
seniority.
As well as seniority.
Right. Because a lot of it had to do with seniority in the past, right? So you spend your years and you get promoted up. But now it's not only about how long you serve, but
academic qualification as well too, sir.
Right. So they've been, in the past it was only a matter of seniority that you end up going into positions of power. But now it's about both service as well as qualifications. Yes. That people move up in areas of thing. All right, now.
So they lean a lot towards qualifications now, but there are persons who will say, quote unquote, intelligent, but as it relates to how to manage and how to lead, they don't have that they don't possess that oh God, give me a word for it, the brain freeze, right?
They don't have the skills to do it.
I wouldn't even use the word skill, right? They're dumb, right? They come in with all different kind of degrees stick on the chest and they can't manage, they can't lead.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. So right? Qualifications can't be the only thing.
Educated but not right. That highly certified but not educated. That's one of another thing I could put it as.
Yeah, you have the two extremes. You have the person who's qualified for a job but is unable to perform, for one reason or the other, and then you have the person who's not qualified but given a job. Yes, Taran. Jairam, go ahead. Jairam, you wanted to make a statement. Ryan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, Taran, go ahead.
In theory, people who have the ability to do the job should be given the opportunity, but I don't think that applies across the board. Oftentimes we see the ancient way before bureaucracy was developed by people like Maxwell Bandy. Before that, we see that still being applied, because sometimes we see people who know it's favoritism, it's nepotism, it's happening, it's all over.
It's about the influence you're able to bring to bear to be able to get more power.
Right, and it's across, not only, it's not a Trinidad and Tobago phenomenon.
No, it's not, it's international, yeah.
Yeah, and you see it, and it speaks to the fact that we give a lot of things lip service, and in reality, it may not always be that way.
Correct.
I just my 2 cents on it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, Ryan.
Yes, sir. Just to expound on what Bruni was saying, we have seen it so much within different organizations that we tend to confuse and mix up education with intelligence, and that is where certification would come in. People with specific certificates and certain accomplishments, we tend to reward on, in a sense, rightfully so, because they would have taken the time, but they may not have the intelligence or the intellect to fulfill certain roles or to successfully fill certain roles and whatnot. And going back to
that's true. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, and going back to the initial question about within our separate fields, I can't speak for all the fields represented here, but I can say within the military, it has been as it has been for eons. It is a matter of seniority, and you will be put into positions of leadership. Now, how effective that is another point, and possibly it may require some level of reform to change that, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. It hasn't happened for ages. This is the way it has been, this way it continues to progress, where we would think by virtue of merit or by virtue of qualifications that we can't put persons in positions of leadership, but it just haven't reached to that point as yet. It maintains that status of seniority moving forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that our military suffers from is performance issues, primarily because we're not an active military. It means we don't go and fight wars and that kind of stuff. We just a force that is in preparation. So with the lack of activity, it does not allow for I think the thing is about the tactical skills being developed and that type of stuff. Johansson?
Yes, sir. Just to piggyback on Bruni and Ryan when they were speaking. Most times people are certified, but because of certification, you may not be qualified to do the job.
Well, they may be certified, which is part of the qualification, but they're unable to perform because they may lack the other skills necessary. Yeah. For example, the expertise to bring it to bear, or the combination of personality skills and that type of stuff. So yes, you're right. There is a disconnect between qualifications and capacity. Because I always have this situation where there are a lot of people who are qualified as teachers, but they can't teach. Because they don't have the personality or the mindset for it, or they've never developed it. In fact, they don't even want to really be teachers, but they've ended up in a teaching position, almost like a default activity, but they ought not to be in a teaching position. Let's put it that way. All right, now, did you all want to take a little break and then we come back? Or you all want to continue going? We have about 20, 30 more slides to go. Let's push on.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's push on. All right. So the framework that I kept on talking about, the model that we're going to be looking at is the relational leadership model. And the model sits heavily on psychological and educational studies. Those frameworks are going to be an important element that help to shape the whole concept. The framework sits upon the primary concept about, it begins with learning about yourself, which is one of the chapters that one of you guys have to deal with. Self-awareness in the context of others, that is understanding others and how they perceive you, and understanding your personal values, beliefs, and commitments. Yes?
Literally finished.
Sorry?
It done. Oh my God.
Oh. All right. So
sorry.
That's okay. Okay, it happens. All right. So this has to do with understanding your belief structures, and that has to do with your moral standings. That's another chapter that you guys are going to be dealing with. But the framework sits upon these things that we have to begin looking at. So in terms of your own leadership development, we need to be looking at your self-awareness, your degree of self-awareness, your ability to effectively listen, your ability to collaborate, compromise, and of course putting all these things into regular practice. Of all of these, the most challenging is going to be effective listening, because without effective listening, all of the others become problematic. So let's examine the effective listening a little bit. So Brandon, tell me, what is effective listening from your perspective? What do you understand that by that frame, by that phrase? Mr. Moore?
Yes, sir. Effective listening. That's when you're able to understand what is being communicated.
Yes.
Keep going.
Yeah, there's something much deeper with this. How do you go about understanding the other person?
you pay attention to exactly what they're saying and making sure that it makes sense, and that you're able to, if necessary, execute whatever they communicating to you in the best way possible.
What do you mean by what do you mean by that last piece? Not so sure about that.
Well, I just mean that
execute
whatever they're trying to
get done.
No, not get done, but if they're trying to communicate something to you that you need to do, that you will have the full understanding of whatever they're saying, so that you can.
So you're thinking about from a functional point of view. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I understand. So there's supposed to be what is referred to as mutual understanding. Yes, that's what you're looking for.
No problem. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think it was Joel whose hand was up before Ryan's. I'm not sure who.
There again, I take the effective listening from manager's standpoint, where you are listening to two sides of into the deliberation between two of your subordinates, and it's about actually listening to what each person has to say compared to the information that you already have at hand to know exactly what is, I don't want to say what is the truth, but in terms of with the right facts, then with the information you already have to know, what is the what is being said.
All right, so you're listening for that's not effective listening. That's listening for evaluation.
Okay. Oh, that was the.
That's not effective listening at all. Ryan, you could help him out.
Yeah. What I believe the meant by effective listening is to go into the conversation without a preconceived notion or preconceived opinion on it, and be open to the information.
That's correct, which means you to effectively listen to somebody else, you have to remove your own barriers to what they're talking about and the individual themselves, emotional or otherwise. Joel, you understand now?
Excuse sir.
Yes, Joel. This is Joel doing. Yeah,
does that include being unbiased?
Yes, you're trying to be unbiased. That's the whole concept there. Now, although this is the concept of effective listening, means you have to dismantle your frame of reference for that type of activity. The issue is that that's not very easy to do, because anytime we get involved in anything, we always, especially men we listen to find solutions. All right, especially if we communicating with women or people from the opposite sex. We have a tendency to always be looking for solutions. And half the time when women are communicating, they're not looking for a solution. They're just looking for you to listen. Now, I'd like some women to kind of probably join in on this. I don't know if Nancy might be able to bring something to bear on that. Or the other ladies in the group, if they would agree with the statement I'm making. Men have a tendency to listen to issues and try to find solutions, but a lot of times women really don't need a solution. What they need is just somebody to speak to and just let things out. How do you feel about that statement I'm making in terms of effective listening between the genders?
So, well, what you are saying really and truly put the men in a bad light, because
no, it's not. It doesn't put them in a bad light, huh?
No, well, right. Let me explain. Let me explain. Behave yourself. Right. What I am saying is that when you say that, yes, they look for solutions, right? What they try to do, if the conversation really going to last 20 minutes, they try to come up with something in 3 minutes so they don't have to hear the, hear the whole thing. To kind of get out of it, because their attention span probably doesn't go that distance too. So yes, it have some of that. Some of that.
Oh my word.
So they try to come up with a solution quick. So
They get out
So
of
I
it
think
then.
I think we strain a little bit from effective listening, sir. I think we strain a little bit from effective listening, sir, because effective listening, as Vanessa rightly things like emphasizing, is just about understanding what the person is, what is being communicated to you.
Yes, and not
Putting
judging,
yourself
but
in the
understanding their
person's
perspective.
shoes without judging them. It don't have to be right, it don't have to be wrong, it
Right,
don't have to be from any point of view. It's just understanding where the person coming from.
right. So, and
Yes, sir.
additionally, we're not asking you to, sorry, we're not asking you to agree with the individual or not. We're just asking you to understand them. All right. So,
Yes, the question that you asked and Karen correctly answered. We have to also add to that the selective hearing. They hear what they want to hear. Answer what to
Ladies,
just
be careful.
selective hearing
Yes,
is
that's the solution that they will quickly find only what they heard and not the whole situation.
yeah, but I know women who also have selective hearing as well. So it's not a gender issue. It's a behavioral issue across the board. Because a lot of times we listen and hear only out of everything that's been said. We only hear what appeals to us. All right. So Taran, Jairam.
So I agree with but I agree with Karen, and I learned something from you today as well. But
What's that?
more importantly, I'll tell you what I learned in a little while. But more importantly, you see the thing with men is that women are emotionally based. So if a woman gonna talk to you, she's gonna tell you a story. Men are practical, so men don't really like to go around that story thing too much. So you find what Bruni is saying, men will sift out what they don't want to hear in some instances. Or they may, there are men who would sit down and listen to women and try to understand what they're saying, because it's so true. It's so true. We have missed that. A lot of men miss that. I must confess. I was told that by a woman quite recently that they don't really want you to say anything to find a solution. They just want to be heard. That is all they want. And that is a secret.
But it's not only it's a little more than just heard. Huh? They want us to listen.
Well, right.
Because whatever it is that they're speaking about is important. And and I know Duncan is coming up here. Something I wanted to make a statement about. Effective listening is easy when you're dealing with strangers, but it's most difficult when you're dealing with people with whom you have relationships. And it's probably where we need to be putting in the most amount of work. The other time it becomes problematic is when you have very strong feelings about what you're speaking about the concept or the idea or the issue that they're talking about. If you have very strong emotional connections or feelings about or towards that particular topic, then that is also a challenge for you to utilize effective listening. All right, Duncan or Taran, you still had something you wanted to finish up with?
Yeah. I wanted to share this with the class, and this is real huge. I recently went to a funeral, and the conversation emanated from the funeral. There's one common thread in all funerals with all the people who are bereaved. All they want is an opportunity to talk to the departed one more time. But here's the funny thing: when the person is alive, in most cases in family settings, they don't communicate well at all.
Yeah, that's true.
And that is where the whole communication thing came in, where communication is the number one way of really interacting, really knowing what a person wants or doesn't want, as the case may be. And we miss that when people live in. And families, it's prevalent where the worst type of communication take place.
Oh yeah, I still remember the last thing I said to my brother before he died. I told him I didn't have time to listen to his stories. To this day, I still regret that, but there's nothing I can do because he died. He died the next day. He came to see me at work, and I told him I didn't have time to listen to him.
Yeah,
it's
a
serious issue because we don't give each other enough time. All right, Duncan.
Pleasant good afternoon, sir. Everybody else, good afternoon.
Yeah, man, say about women emotional. I want to disagree to a certain extent, but I ain't going there. I didn't come to ask that. What I came to ask, the point that you raised, which was listening to somebody without judgment, right? As when you're listening to them, taking a neutral stance as to what they're saying. Isn't that empathy? So
No.
is it that?
Well, part of it becomes empathic listening, because that will help. Empathic listening is part of the movement towards understanding the person's position and point of view. Yes, you're right. But it doesn't mean that you agree absolutely with what they have to say, their position and point of view. But you would need to try to understand how they're feeling about the situation. That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. So it's safe to say a quality of effective listening
is empathic listening.
Empathic listening. All right, cool. That is what I wanted to be clear on terms. That's it.
Yes, it would help. All right, see Ryan joined.
Yes, sir. First of all, let me apologize. If you had a clear outline and time frame for your class, this group will throw that totally out of whack, right?
Yes, I know it does.
I'm
seeing that happen.
We're a talkative bunch.
That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah. On the same topic of effective listening, in my experience, I think as human, our human nature, and it is regardless of our gender, or race, or religious identity, whatever. It is difficult to separate our subjectivity from almost any instance. We always have that preconceived notion in our mind what it is we think, and our own subjective feelings towards it. I have come across very few, probably I could count on one hand, truly objective persons that I know.
It's quite true, because Ryan, that is the challenge that leaders have to face, and that's why it's listed here as one of the things that required in leadership development, that we have to develop the skill of being able to listen effectively. And it doesn't mean that you have to listen effectively every second of every day, because if that was the case, we'd be in real trouble. The issue is that when it becomes important, that we can put down our our defenses and truly listen to understand what somebody else is feeling and how they're feeling, and understand why they are feeling, because that brings us to the other area. Tara, I see your hand still up. Is it up because you forgot to put it down, or did you want to add something else?
Oh, sorry, sir. I forgot to put it down.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. So we talked about this, and as I said, of these developmental issues here, effective listening is probably the most challenging one. The foundation principles of leadership is that we have to remember leadership is of concern to all of us. But although it's of a concern to all of us, it's viewed and valued differently by everybody. It's also not a static issue, it's a dynamic issue, and whatever leadership techniques that you're going to utilize, it must be flexible and adjust with the circumstances that you find yourself. So you can't get stuck in one style. You have to be able to utilize different types of leaderships in different circumstances. Because if you think about it, if you're in an emergency circumstance, you can't be using more participative, flexible approaches to your leadership style, when at that point in time you need decisive, quick decision making. All right. So again, based upon the circumstances, different types or styles of leadership is required. And importantly, the most important thing here is that in terms of the relational leadership process, this model believes that it is a skill that can be learned and developed, as opposed to how a lot of people feel that leadership is something that you have to be born with. To continue, the whole concept is that in order for us to be good leaders, it requires that we have high ethical standards, to be able to encourage positive change in others, and for people to be taking up their social responsibility. Now, In relation to that, it means that as an individual, you have to exhibit critical thinking, high levels of credibility. You must be honest and authentic. And because all of those shape your integrity and they all stem from your ethical behavior. These are really important because you can't ask somebody else to do something if you are unable to do it. You can't ask somebody to be honest if you're not honest. That's sort of like, you know, your parents telling you not to lie and they're lying all the time. It don't work that way. Pot calling kettle black kind of situation. That is very, very difficult. Now, the three basic principles of the developmental process starts with the knowing element. You must know yourself, which is one of the first assignments that you have, the self-analysis. You must know who you are. You must understand how change has occurred in your life. And you also need to understand why other people around you would look at the same things you're looking at and see it differently. That's a really important thing. So what are you all seeing here? Duncan. Anyone in Duncans?
I've seen several things. I've seen a scholar lady looking into the mirror.
Right. So those are the two main things you should be seeing. Either a skull or a woman looking into the mirror. Kind of like doing her makeup kind of thing. All right. Everybody else is seeing both those images there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yep. All right, good.
So I seen a skull, but I seen a bullet hole in one of the eyes.
Which one? Over here?
Yeah,
this one. This one.
Next one, the next one. Yeah, it looks
This
like a
one
bullet
here?
hole. Yeah, it looked like.
That's a woman head, by the way. That's a
see that
hair
too,
right there. All right. Tell me what you're seeing here.
A young lady and an old lady.
All right. So you hold up there. You've seen two things. All right. Let me find out. How many people seen a young lady looking over her shoulder?
I see that young lady looking over her shoulder.
I seen the young lady looking over her shoulder.
All right, Rona. See your hand went up.
I'm just seeing the young lady.
All right. So how many people see an old lady looking down?
Oh, wow, you seen that?
That's usually the harder one to see. The old lady looking down.
Yes,
Anybody? I know one of the Duncan said they saw it. All right. So who's not seeing the old lady or who's not seeing the young lady?
I am not seeing the old lady.
All right, that's one. Anybody else not seeing?
I'm not seeing the old lady, sir. I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing the old lady.
I'm not
All
seeing the
right,
old
so
lady.
all right, so listen to me, all of you all. Yes, Joel, your hand is up. You're not seeing the old lady as well, right?
No, sir. I was just saying I wasn't seeing the old lady.
All right, good. So let me take you all through an exercise. Close your eyes for about 2 seconds here. Now open your eyes and listen carefully and look carefully at the screen. This is the old lady. This is her nose. This is one of her eyes. This is the eyelash.
Yeah, that boss. I know see it.
This is the chin here. Seeing that there?
Yeah.
Anybody else seeing that?
No, sir.
Right. Listen to me.
I'm not seeing the old lady. I'm not seeing her.
Yeah,
All
I don't
right.
see it. No, sir. No, sir. I'm still not seeing that.
All right. Right. Hold. Let's go through. Close your eyes again. Now open it up and follow me. You see this mark here on her neck? This is her mouth. This is her chin. She's looking down. All right. This is her nose. All of this
Just
is
saw
her
it.
nose.
I just saw it. I just saw it. Yeah.
This is her eye. This is the other eyelash on the other side of her nose. This
So I
is
got
this is the hair above.
yes.
This is the hair tie.
Wow.
This is the feather. And this is her jacket that she's looking down. It's almost like she's cool and she's looking down into her coat like that.
Yes.
Seeing it now?
Yes, sir.
Karen, you seeing it now?
Sir, I don't want to lie. Hell no.
Karen, she have a crooked nose and a sad mouth.
Yes.
She here is the puff above. Where you think is what you see in the black hair is a puff.
Yeah.
A puff of hair.
Sticking out
And then three grains of hair stick out on top of the head tie.
Well, it's not really hair. This is like a feather.
All right.
Well, it looks
okay,
like a feather.
yes.
You see it now? This piece here, this
yes.
clear spot here, that's the neck on the young lady. Look at it as the chin of the older woman looking down. This is her mouth here.
Okay.
Seen it?
Or the description of the woman could be of a wicked old witch.
I prefer to think of a cold old woman.
So you know I can't unsee it now. All the time I couldn't see it before.
Yeah, but it takes time and effort to see something from somebody else's perspective or to see other perceptions that might exist in one circumstance. That's what this exercise is really about. This is
So
yes,
before
go
you
ahead.
go on, so as I say, it takes time to see something from somebody else's perspective, and as Bruno was just indicating that now she can't unsee it.
Yes,
right?
and that's
is it that do you disregard your way
initial
of
perception?
thinking? Yeah, your
No.
initial perception after that.
No, it's stronger. Now you can look at this image and see both
from two perspectives.
From both sides.
All right, I understand.
That's the power of taking the time to see things from other people's points of view. Because now you can actually, and not just seeing it, but understanding it. Now you have more information. Some people will view this position or this issue from this perspective and that perspective and that type of stuff. That is important. As a leader, the more information you have, the better quality decision you're going to make. So when you can see things from different perspectives, from different points of view, all at the same time, it gives you much more power if you understand as a decision maker, as a leader.
Understand, sir.
That makes sense?
A lot.
All right. You see this here? This is a commonality that takes place in most of our lives. Because both persons are right, because their perception is based upon where they are. And that's the point of this picture. This picture is telling you, as anyone, if you are any one of those individuals, stop arguing with the person, because their perception is from their position in life, from where they are, from what they've experienced, from the shoes that they've walked in. And the only way as a leader is that you need to go from their side and look at things from their perspective. You don't have to agree with their perspective, but you need to understand why they have that perspective. That's the more important thing that we, so sometimes people look at, that exercise as being, what's the word I want to use? As being weak and not, holding to your principles. That's not true. You and everybody, if we spent a little time trying for a little bit, understanding why somebody else sees something the way they do, and you begin to understand them a great deal more, it'll be less confrontational from that perspective, that you'll end up with that situation. And that's the power of trying to understand other people's point of view. That's why we talk about knowing yourself, because you will then know what your bias is. And therefore you will know to look out for those situations where your bias is going to show itself because of the nature of what goes on. For example, most individuals here have a biasness towards a particular type of individual when you meet them, because you have a predisposition for that, to that type of individual. You tend to find yourself being attracted to those types of individuals or gravitate towards those particular individuals. You need to understand that is a problem that you need to treat with, or an issue or bias that you have, and you have to work with it. So knowledge about your own bias, as well as developing the skills to understand why somebody else is seeing things from their perspective, or from the way they see it, is a skill that you're going to have to develop. All right, that makes sense, guys? Yeah. A powerful thing here that starts up the process of the knowing element of the 3 basic principles of leadership development. The second element is the being. You must be ethical. You must be principled. You must be open, caring, and inclusive. Now, ethical and principled we spoke about before. Open, caring, and inclusive is the problem. Because when we become more ethical and more principled, we tend to become more closed, less caring, and rather exclusive rather than inclusive. That is something that you see happening a lot in our societies, where some people perceive themselves as being better off than others, or so we don't want to use being less willing to accept and be inclusive to people who are not like-minded like yourself. And that is a problem that you have to deal with. You have to be, even though you're ethical and principled, you still have to be open to people who might be less ethical than you, or may have questionable principles or standards. You still have to be inclusive of those individuals, because they are going to be in your organization anyway. All right. So it's something that it's a challenge that you're going to have to face in relation to this. And the reason why you have to do that is because you have to learn to care about people, because it's only when you care about people that you can actually get the best out of them. And you have to genuinely do so. You can't fake it. If you look at this quotation here from Branston, he's the CEO of Virgin Records and Virgin Airlines. All right, having a personality of caring about people is important. You can't be a good leader unless you generally like people. That's how you bring out the best in them. So that is actually a very, very important part of the being element. The third part of the principle is the doing part. You must act in a socially responsible manner, consistently and congruently, as a participant in your community and on your commitments and passions. Now, so what we mean by socially responsible, it means that whatever we do, we have to keep in mind the impact that our actions have on our society around us, on the community around us. Now, if we think about, so this is something that Trinidadians, I have seen, we drive in a manner in which we show very poor social responsibility, because we oftentimes do things that make driving difficult for the other person to the side of us, and especially behind us, because all we are concerned with is pursuing the goal of getting to my place or getting to my job in time. And we put other people at risk. That's just an example of what I'm talking about here. If you're in a position of leadership, that behavior has to stop. You need to pay attention to what you're doing and the impact it's likely to have on the society. Organizations have social responsibilities, because what they do can have negative impacts on the society in which they operate. And that is dangerous, because if they're not paying attention to what they're doing and the impact that it's having, they will soon lose credibility in society, and people will stop believing in that organization and stop trusting in their products and stop trusting in what they're doing. All right. So those are things that we have to look out for. Now, the 3 steps that we looked at doesn't mean that we can reduce that, reduce the development of leadership into that kind of step-by-step 1, 2, 3, and we're done. But it does set up the ramifications for us to realize that what we're talking about here is a process that is a real process, and it requires that we change the way in which we think and we develop our own our philosophies of leadership. And with it, we have to include identifying those core values which we hold dear to us because they become critical in our development as a leader. So that it is something that you have to kind of work from inside out to get to the point of being a leader. You have to work from making you a better individual before you can start to say, okay, I can be a good leader, because it takes time to really get to know you. Because if you really don't know you, if you haven't spent time getting to know yourself, then you're not going to be able to do the rest of the stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, because things will suddenly start to change on you because you're unaware of what your core values are. And all of a sudden something comes up that makes you behave in a particular manner and you don't understand why you did what you did. That's a tricky thing that you want to talk about. Now, the work that we want to put in here is necessarily going to be some difficult work, but rather than hold to the paradigm of working hard, we want to work smart. So working smart means working collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. Let's take that instead. Collectively smarter is a common situation here. When you're faced with a problem, the more perspectives that you have available to evaluate and assist with finding a solution to that problem is going to be better, because more people bring more experience to the problem. But if you alone are looking at a problem, the only solutions that you can come up with are those from your limited perspective, your limited training, and your limited concepts of things. That's why collectively smarter is that all of us are smarter than just the one of us. That makes sense? This is why the college places so much emphasis on teamwork and group work. And you guys are working organizations, and your jobs require that you work in teams and groups all the time. So this is not anything new for you. Reflectively smarter, this is one that takes time to develop the habit to do, which is periodically we need to be looking backwards and reflecting on what we did in the past, not only in looking at what went wrong, but looking at what we did right, for 2 reasons. One, we want to repeat what we did so that it becomes easily attainable all the time. So whatever we did correctly, we want to repeat that. But whatever we did incorrectly, we need to evaluate that as well, so that we don't repeat that activity. But we have to know of all of the things that we've done, what was right and what was wrong. We tend to focus a lot of our attention on what went wrong, rather than also reflecting on what went right, so that we know, okay, we continue to do this piece, but we'll tweak this piece so that we can improve that outcome or that element of the outcome that we're looking at. The practice of being reflective, of oftentimes going backwards and looking at what you've done in the past to improve things moving forward, is a habit that you have to develop to be able to collectively develop yourself in terms of leadership development. All right, spiritually smarter. This doesn't have anything to do with religion or your belief in God. This has to do with an awareness of your core values and principles. If you ever want to see somebody's or know what your core values are in life, pay attention to how you behave when the world falls apart around you. If you pay attention to what you've done or what other people do when their world falls apart, that will tell you what are their most important core values. You need to know what they are, because those become what holds the line for you. All right, they become your rudder in the rough times. Okay, that is ever so true. You need to pay attention to being spiritually smarter. And of course, you need to be aware of if some of the values you have are a bit questionable. You have to be making those kind of changes and adjustments accordingly. All right. So far, so good. Everybody's following this. Now, earlier on,
by your concept of spiritually smarter, have some things to do with self-awareness?
Yes, all of this comes from that whole process of self-awareness.
Okay,
but sometimes it's hard. It's hard to see this, what your core values are, unless it's put to the test. All of us think when we say, okay, my core values, I'm honest, I have high levels of integrity, I am a hard worker and that kind of stuff. But those are things we can say, but what is actually true? You understand? I'm fair and I'm unbiased and I try to be this and I try to be that. And you make all these nice statements. I mean, if you sit down and you write those things down, but then crunch time, you don't behave anywhere near that, then you need to be aware of the fact that there's a huge variation between what you say and what you do. And that's not going to be credible. It's going to affect your authenticity, because you say one thing and do another is the issue where, or the time when people are going to say, all right, Vanessa says something. Okay. All right, that's the time when people are going to absolutely waste it on, because they know you're not truthful, you're not being authentic as a leader. Okay. All right. So we spoke
about the terminology. Boy, if I didn't know Jesus, if I only didn't know Jesus.
Yeah.
In a situation.
True.
You get me right?
No, clarify it for me.
All right. Say, for instance, you're in a situation where it's terrible. Say you're in an argument, or you're back against the wall where you know that you could have done something. You literally could have done something, and you know you'd feel good about doing it. And you tell yourself, you know what? If I didn't have Jesus say, if only I didn't have Jesus say me, you know what? I would have done this, or I would have done that. And and I say Jesus, but it could have been, whatever
what you're talking about, restraint. You're talking about not to do something that you felt you could have done.
Yeah.
Right. So you wanted to hit somebody or beat somebody or break something.
Yeah.
But
take some kind of revenge in some kind of way.
Okay. So, but you showed restraint.
And because they show restraint, it's some form of spiritual leadership.
Yes, because again, that is when at your lowest point, did you resort to violence? It doesn't mean you didn't get angry or you weren't hurt, but you did not resort to violence. Then because if that was your first choice, that you get upset and you lash out at somebody. Now, lashing out doesn't only mean lashing out physically, but you could also lash out emotionally or verbally. All of those types of violence in that sense, and we'll come across a section, or one of your groups is going to come across Mahatma Gandhi's list of violence in life. I can't remember it, but when it comes up, I'll try and point it out to you. It speaks to that whole issue of your spirituality and your value principles, those things that you hold dear to you. Violence takes on many forms: emotional, mental, verbal, physical, even passive-aggressive behavior. Those things create problems, and is a response that you can get into that hurts others. Not necessarily physically, but in other manners. Right? But yes, That's that kind of feeling that you get. Speaking of which, when we talk about those things, we're talking about paradigms. So you could get stuck in a paradigm, which is a pattern of behavior or method of looking at things. This is asking what your current paradigm in leadership is about. And the current paradigm generally is that leaders are people who are, better than me, born this way, that kind of stuff. But we want to say to you that leadership is not something they're born with. It's something that you develop. And where we have situations, so if we look at the world around us today, we are not seeing the kind of solutions and movements or the kind of leaders that would push us or lead us into a better situation. In fact, the life just seems to be circling around the drain, and it doesn't seem to be getting it better. And is it that the way in which we're going about selecting leaders or choosing leaders requires some sort of change? And that's what we call a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is a new way or changing the way in which we do something to be able to get a better result, changing the pattern of behavior. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about in terms of if we want better leadership around us, then we have to become ourselves better leaders. Because we have to remember that the paradigm shift that I'm bringing up here now is that leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as a process that involves the followership. So this is something that we need to think about, because this is the point that we were making about the influencers that affect the behavior of leaders, because followership is really the most important aspect of leadership. It is more important than the leader, because without followership, you cannot lead. All right? Because followership is leadership in action among people in a group. Think about this from that perspective. You cannot lead if there's nobody to follow. You could call yourself a leader, but if you have no followers, nothing happening. All right? So what kind of followers are we talking about? Now, this comes from the textbook, and it talks about the 4 types of leaders. Yes, Johan. Atherton, go ahead. Hands up.
Yes, sir. I just talking about followers. They have a common term people is use in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
That is quite true, and you're going to see it when we start to look at this here, because you have to lead by example. That makes sense? All right. So the 4 types of follower types that the text gives us here is the partner, the politician, the contributor, and the subordinate. Now, the axes or the performance matrix that they're looking at here is their relational initiative and their performance initiative. So their relational initiative has to do with their ability to develop and maintain good social relationships and good sort of like behave, link up well with other people. Performance initiatives has to do with the ability to actually get the job done. So if you look at a partner, partners are people who are high in both relational and performance. Generally, partners are people who you could put in charge of a lot of the project because they are good at both elements. A politician is good at the relational part, but they're very bad at the performance part. So you might find, like in a group project, you have somebody who's really good at the presentation element, but they're real bad at the research aspect and the writing aspect. So you might want to partner a politician with a contributor. You know why? Because the contributor is really good at the performance elements and doing the research and that kind of stuff, but the politician, but they're really bad at the relational and maybe the presentation type stuff. So you link the politician and the contributor together so that they can help each other, complement each other. A partner, you can put them with subordinates because they will do nothing if they're not, they won't do anything. They won't develop any relationship and they won't do anything unless they don't have some sort of stimulus, and the partner would be the best person to put together with a support plan. Now, the problem with partners, how that comes up though, is that partners can challenge leaders. And in fact, leaders need to pay attention to partners. Why? Because the partner is the individual with whom we need to be looking at as developing to move on in for them and themselves to become a leader in the future. So partners are the people that you want to look at for continuity and for succession planning. But a lot of times followers tend to be threatened by partners and try to put them down. So that's something that you have to pay attention to. The idea here is that as a leader, if you know your follower types, then you know how to be able to utilize them to their best ability. And that's the important thing. Now, the Hyacinth model, which is not from this text, but comes from another text, speaks about the 7 different types of followers for a leader in a political environment. So you have loyalists, sycophants, critics, opportunists, spectators, traitors, and realists. And again, the issue is the same thing. As a leader, you need to be aware of what they are and what they do, and you need to be able to know who falls into which category so that you will know how to work with them and how to get the best out of them for your circumstances or situations, or simply just to be careful with those individuals. So again, it's not about learning these things, but more importantly, to be aware that these are the conditions or situations that faces you. All right, so follower types. This type here, I can see that this one kind of works well with when you think about it in the context of group presentations. And this one, sorry, this one here really looks at it in the form of if you're in a politically oriented organization, you know, you could be in some sort of community group where you're the president of the group and you have all of these people following you, because the only way you're getting into that presidency is because of they voted for you in that kind of situation. So that goes into that kind of small political situation to very broad political situations where you might be leader of a party moving in a country or in that type of stuff. So those are the kind of things that you want to pay attention to when it looks to follower types, because followers have things that they have to do, and that's called their followers' responsibilities. They are there to support the leader. Without the support of followers, leaders can't really do much. Good followers also take initiative. You don't wait to be told to do something, you do it on your own. You also, as a follower, counsel and coach both other followers as well as the leader, because oftentimes left alone, the leader might kind of flounder and they need to be encouraged and assisted. And followers also have that type of a good follower will be able to provide that kind of role for them. Raise issues and concerns when necessary. This is important. Some leaders don't like followers to come to them, and worse yet, a lot of followers don't like to bring issues to the forefront when they're talking to their leaders because they're afraid of the kind of backlash. But that's one of the real responsibilities of a follower. Seek and encourage honest feedback. Well, that goes without saying. Getting honest feedback is something that not only assists the follower, but also assists the leader to pay attention and make sure they have the right perspective. Clarify your role as a follower and the expectations that the leader has of you, because if you're not sure what you're there for and what's expected of you, you may not understand what you need to be doing, and that's important. Show appreciation not only to the leader but also to other followers as well. Keep the leader informed as critical across the board, and resist inappropriate influences of the leader. Don't let the leader lead you down the wrong path. This is some of the things that a lot of leaders, especially charismatic leaders, don't have, because some of these followers don't resist those inappropriate activities. Then this is how we end up getting leaders that have a whole set of followers who don't care that this person behaves in this manner, but they're willing to follow them regardless. because they don't resist the inappropriate activities or influences of the leader. Now, their competency is required to be able to complete those roles. They have to have loyalty. They have to function well in change-oriented environments. They have to function well on teams and groups. They have to think critically and independently, and they have to consider integrity of the most paramount importance. So these are things that the text is telling us, but a lot of individual leaders don't like this. Yes, they're okay with the loyalty, they like the teamwork and the change orientation, but they don't like critical and independent thinking. And sometimes the more questionable the followers' behavior, the better for the leader, because they can trap that person and force them to do what they want to do, what they want them to do, that type of stuff. And especially if they can't think independently and critically, then those are not good followers. You want people around you, good, independent, critical thinking individuals. So I wouldn't, and the text asks the question, is the term follower the best way to describe this type of person? I have always preferred to use the word associates, but what are some of the terms you might want to use for that, for a follower who, with those kind of qualities? I say they're the associates. We could call them supporter. Yeah, okay, maybe. What else? Partners. All right. Okay, so this here brings us into the last thing we were just looking at there was critical independent thinking and the level of activity or action that they take part in. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to attract people who have positive, who are independent and critical thinkers who remain active in the organization or active with you. You want the majority of your people here. You don't want them to get alienated with you, because it means that you are doing things that is discouraging people from especially your best people, the critical thinkers in your group, the independent critical thinkers, to become very passive. And a lot of people in our society have actually fallen into this category of alienated followers. This is when we think about it from the political spectrum, we have a lot of people that fall here. These are people who don't vote. You have a good set of people who fall into yes and sheep, and a lot of these are not encouraged. So again, this is just a matrix that allows you to evaluate individuals in terms of the type of follower that they have that exists. There's a different model. And again, knowing about these things allows you to effectively try to change things so that you could encourage more effective followership. Look towards getting some of your alienated people back into the effective area, and educated your sheep and your yes people into being more independent and critical thinking. Now, again, maximum leaders don't like that. They prefer everybody to be sheep and yes people. They don't like the upper two, because they can challenge an individual and they may not like it. All right, leadership styles. So we talked about this, the classical leadership style, laissez-faire, autocratic, participative, situational, emergent, transactional, transformational, and visionary. Again, it doesn't matter which style, but you should be able to utilize each style depending upon the circumstances. Some of the more challenging ones are transformational and visionary, because transformational requires that you use more psychological stimulation and motivational theory that works with it. Visionary, on the other hand, are those people who paint pictures of things that don't exist and convince you that that's where you want to go. So those are special people. However, people who tend to be good visionaries actually can be very poor everyday type leaders, because they are They can't handle the nitty-gritty of day-to-day activities, like the transactional nature of some of their leadership decisions. Visionary decisions require, time to think, reflect, and try to postulate what the future is likely to look like. All right. Okay. So who's the leader? Anybody who actively engages with others to achieve some sort of change. Notice they haven't spoken about whether it's positive or negative. We'll get to that in the future. The purpose of leadership: motivate employees. We talked about that. Attain the organizational goals. If you don't attain the goals, then you're not achieving anything. Ensure that the rules are followed both by yourself and followers. Provide continuity and momentum, and this is what we talk about: making sure that we continue moving towards the goals that we want to get in a particular rate or state that that makes us move along. So you keep on hitting these marks and moving forward. Embrace and foster change, that we act for the common good for everybody. We behave socially responsible. We are civically engaged, and we are being civically responsible. So again, we spoke about social responsibility. This is our commitment as an individual leader to the well-being of the people around us, the world around us, and the public good of the place that we're in. So, we don't do things and we don't encourage behaviors and activities that is harmful for people and the world around us. That's a critical thing in terms of, we spoke about this before. Civic engagement means we have a heightened sense of responsibility for all of our communities that we get involved with. Work, or social environment, or family environment, and the actual community that we live in. Sometimes there's a disengagement that takes place. People literally just come home and sleep and then get up and leave. And that's a sad thing, especially because that's the nature of a lot of our societies. People just home for a little while because most of the day they're out at work, and that environment, that there's little sense of responsibility for what's happening around your home, around your house, that kind of stuff. So this here is a heightened responsibility of of civic engagement in those communities, including work. So it can't only be work, it has to be work, social, family. So you have to kind of balance your behavior. So here are some of the things that you could get up to in terms of civic engagement. Participating in voluntary work in your community, self-help programs, volunteering to clean up, helping to, do things in your society and the community around you. Developing trust with other people, doing things not because you're going to get something back, but because it's going to get paid for, those kind of things. Being involved in politics and democracy. So those are some of the actions that you get into. All right, civic responsibility, sense of personal responsibility. Individuals should feel to uphold their obligations as part of any community. So that requires that we need to go to school if you're a student, obey the law, pay taxes when called upon, do your jury duty. Those kind of things are the kind of activities we need to be doing. You guys get involved with a fair amount of this stuff already, serving the military, display patriotism, that type of stuff. Those are all part and parcel of the whole process of doing this. Now, this brings us to whether or not a leader should know everything. And the truth to that is that is an impractical assumption. Should the leader know everything? No, that is not a possibility. No individual can know everything. And you can't try to fool people into thinking that you know everything. So at the end of the day, what it does require is that as a leader, you need to be open to learning. And we have to recognize that knowledge does not only reside in you, but it resides in everybody around you. So that all of us are smarter than one of us. Remember that, collectively smarter. So the whole group, including leader, needs to make sure that the environment that you create in your organization is one that is open to learning, making mistakes and sharing knowledge. Far too often, leaders who are not who opting for this, they're not open to learning because they say this is not a place where you be learning. You're supposed to learn this in school. Mistakes will not be tolerated, and any knowledge I have is my knowledge. I'm not giving it to anybody else because there's a belief that if I share my knowledge, I give up my power, because they equate knowledge with power. So when you have that kind of mindset, that is unfortunate, because a lot of our leaders still think like this: knowledge being power. What you don't know is hurting you. Yeah. All right. So this is the learning model that comes from the class, the basic from the text, I should say. The correlation or the intersection of focus, capacity, and willingness is what you will be able to do. All right. And that's where we want to be able to move to. But if you put your will and your focus onto something, you can just be, it's something you want to do. Focus on capacity, something you can do. Capability and your will is something you could do, but you actually have no focus on it at this point in time. You want all three of these elements to coincide for us to be able to learn things. Now that's one model. This model here, which is more along the lines of scientific methodology, where you conceptualize something, you apply it. From the application, you distill the experience, the outcomes, you reflect upon it, and you either go back and you try it again and then go through the application process. So generally, when we do the scientific methodology, when we get to this point here, that critical inquiry element, when we get a positive, repeatable event, then we get to the point of putting that into existing theory, and that theory becomes mainstream, which then takes us into it being applied around the thing. So this is another learning methodology that is utilized. So the idea about this is that the best organizations out there, if you think of like Google, and Costart, for example, we always encourage lifelong learning. Those kind of organizations have a tendency to have longer lifespans because the entire community is learning and the environment is set up to continuously learn and relearn things and renew things. And that's how we end up trying to stay on top of things and stay current. Now, one other form of learning that we want to talk about here is experiential learning. This is probably the most popular way and probably the best way to get to some of your information, and that is through experience. We learn by doing things or by thinking about that. That's abstract conceptualization or by concrete experience. So then we then process that information either by reflecting on the information, which is reflective observation, or by applying that information, which is active experimentation. So this is the process that I talk about. We either start here or here. So we abstract, think about it, we try it, we get to the concrete experience, we reflect on it, think about it, act, and so on. So this is a experiential learning. It is probably the most powerful way in which we learn to do things, by doing it, by thinking about it, trying it, doing it, so that we get better and better, because that's the nature of life. We don't get things right the first time, especially anything that requires any sort of physical skill, or combination of physical skill and know-how. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't get one and done kind of situation like that. So at the end of the day, leadership is something that is something that we all need to get involved in. So I like this quotation from this student from the textbook. Leadership is a role open to anyone. Leadership is living by a personal set of rules in which you motivate others to do the right thing, be engaged in the world, and listen to others and their concern. Leadership is focused on the other person. And this is the part I like the most about this statement. Leadership is not about you, it's about the other person. And that's probably the most powerful element in this quotation that comes from us. Now, this is just my closing quote. These are my citations here for the use of stuff that I've been dealing with here. Now, we have a couple of other chapters to go. Now, if you get a chance, go through the slides from the other presentations, because there's a lot more. As I said, those presentations are set up for you to go on there on your own with it. It is not one that should be utilizing for presentation purposes. But I'd like you to go through it. But next class, what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at the evolution of leadership theory, I believe. I think that's what the next chapter is about, yeah. The evolution of the leadership theory over time frames, and we'll see the relationships that are going to come up with them. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's session. Anybody has any questions they want to ask? We had a lot of questions earlier. Anybody? Nobody?
I have one question. I guess it's a point of view on something.
What
prevents a country like Trinidad and Tobago, which is already predominantly a rich country? Just a second. I'm in class. Just hold it back 1 second, right? 1 second. Yeah, predominantly a rich country from looking at Singapore and say Saudi Arabia, Dubai. Yeah, what prevents us from doing better, from making the people in the country better living? The livelihood, the standard of living.
I don't know. You tell me.
Corruption, but is it? Do you think it's having anything to do with the Western influence that prevents us from moving forward? Is it having anything to do with us being under the Commonwealth or system?
I think it's a lack of will. I just think it's a lack of will. A lack of willingness to do the difficult things. Because it means making difficult choices and doing without some things at some point in time. And of course, not pleasing everybody, because you can't please everybody in terms of their situation. But again, the whole point is we can't exist on our own. So I mean, I don't know. There's so many things that can be said. I don't know what to say. Ryan, you have your hand up. Sorry about that.
That's okay, sir. I actually have a question for you, not regarding the lesson itself. I know you have up in the e-classroom we have this chapter up as a video. Is it possible you can upload the presentation as well for easier?
Yes, I have to remember to put up the slides by itself. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. I'll remember to do that. Okay. Somebody said nepotism. What is this? Corruption, nepotism, and being a neo-colonial reactive society. That's true. Actually, Peter, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Not just about the corruption and nepotism, but let's start with for a long time, we didn't have a lot of say in what we could have done in this country, because we didn't control what was referred to back then in the 60s and 70s, the commanding heights of the economy. We didn't own the resources of our country. And that meant that the resources were being extracted by these large multinational corporations, the profits from which we weren't getting any returns. And that's because the colonial authorities treated each of these countries as history has a lot to do with why we are where we are. It treated the colonies as resources, and they didn't really care about the development of the country as long as they got the resource that they wanted out of it. So initially it was they wanted the land so that they could plant sugarcane, make sugarcane and get sugar. Then we had oil, and that started that whole process. In fact, it was oil that no, by the time we developed the oil industry, we were independent, but we were still stuck in the we were stuck with imperialism, because the only way we could have developed oil was to bring in the large oil companies, and they came in with a very imperialistic view of they know better than everybody. They know better than us because we don't know nothing. We stupid, all right. And they would take the oil, give us well, no money. They would take the oil, sell it. They would pay people who worked here, and the oil companies and stuff like that, and the money will go to the crown, which was England, or to the multinational corporation. All the profits would go there. So yes, a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had no control or limited control of our economy. And the little bit of the economy that was available, we fought over it. We fought over the little bit of the economy. And then when we did get control of the economy after Eric Williams made a decision to nationalize the country and got rid of a lot of the oil companies and stuff like that, and started to internalize and get as much of earn as much of the money as possible. It led to an excessive quantity of this money being available, and he couldn't control the individuals around him, so there was a lot of corruption and nepotism, and that meant that you had the wrong people in the wrong places and for the wrong reasons. So they were there because of what they could have gotten. They weren't there to develop the country and develop the nation. So we have this historic nonsense that keeps on going, which is one of the reasons why we kind of stuck the way we are. All right. Ryan, remind me about doing that. Actually, you know what? Let me do that now. This is the one here for this evening's class. Let me just add it first. Wow, that's why. Why is that? Hold on a second. Let's go to ahead. I'm sorry. Thousand uploads. Upload size supposed to be 15. All right, that should be it then. I'll have to do it in the other class as well. Seven. Actually, I could do it right here. Right. So while we're doing this, everything's okay. Everybody has any other questions they want to ask?
Yes, sir. I have a question.
What's that?
In light of what was shared today, probably over the past year, from my experiences, people would have come through this course seem not to exhibit some of these basic fundamental principles when they conclude having been exposed to some of these things.
Well, again, it takes time for something like this to have an impact. Because, all right, so the generally when you are first exposed to a particular concept or idea, you like it and you want to accept it. But the problem that you face is that when you go back out into the world of work, integrating it into the existing circumstances or situation becomes problematic because there's resistance. In fact, you're gonna meet this in you'll have institutional resistance to change, and the organizational culture will negate against it, especially if it's only coming from a few people at a time. The idea is that eventually there'll be enough of you out there with this kind of process thinking in your mind that eventually you'll be able to effect the change that we want to look for in the future that we're looking at. So yeah, at a point, yeah, you have that situation. I think I saw somebody's hand come up. Sterling, I think your hand was up again.
So just an observation, and
what's
is
that?
it that when you were plotting the course that you're in the formation, well, as Taran said, looking at development in the students' formation, you all decided to put these subjects together for the semester because I think some of them are overlapping in the sense of ethics, and then you have leadership.
Yeah, there was a purposeful overlap. Yes.
Okay.
All right. There is an overlap between the two. Sequencing though is kind of off a little bit, because maybe you should have done the ethics first and then come and do the leadership and ethics afterwards, because the approaches that we're going to utilize for these two classes a little different, but you realize there's a huge overlap between the two. All right. Okay. So I think I have the recording still running. Right. Okay. We stop the recording now.